Hi, my name is David Markarian, the designer of the MyoVision 3G system. I'm going to explain today how to do dynamic range of motion and EMG together. This assumes that all your system's been set up following the videos and they're all bound. All the green lights will turn on for all the devices. Make sure that the electrodes are set up. You want to put the lead wires in so that on the left side you have your white lead wires. So the device actually was designed ergonomically that when you hold it vertically, that all your left side lead wires, the top would be for the cervical paraspinals, bottom sEMs. In the lumbar spine, you'd just be using the top set of electrodes. Remember, red is right. So we've got our right set of lead wires plugged in so that the top will be the lumbar right side, or in the cervical spine, the cervical paraspinals, with the bottom set of red lead wires going to the cervical sEMs. And then way at the bottom, you see there's one left connection there. That's on the right hand side, which is the ground, the black lead wire, which goes in the bony prominence in the shoulder, most likely. It doesn't really matter where the ground goes as long as it's not directly near the actual placement of the electrodes for the other lead wires. You have a belt, which it's a good idea to leave the belt connected to the back of the physio monitor so it's easy to put on the patient. That clip there allows you to clip it on and use it different ways. You can put it over the shoulder of the cervical spine. You can put like a purse over the shoulder so that it is not hanging behind the patient but on the side instead. The lumbar spine, you hang it in the side so that it allows you to do range of motion and EMG simultaneously. Make sure the power switch is turned on. That's the travel switch, which allows you to depower the device completely. You're going to leave that on in the clinic most of the time as long as the white button is not being pressed. It's critical to remember that every single motion as you go through, you're beginning the test by pressing the button on only one of the probes, one of the range of motion devices. That zeroes it, and then you begin the motion itself. It's also how you move throughout from screen to screen is you use the one single button press. You hold it down for approximately 2 seconds. You can see the placement. Normally the patient's bent forward when you attach the electrodes, so they're not removed easily. They don't come off. They stick on well. You can see this is after they've been bent forward. You can see the placement of approximately L1 and L5. This is a little bit closer together. But you can see the placement of the electrodes. Again, left is white, red is right, and the ground is in the shoulder. So we start by clicking scan. Put a patient name in. You can either click on search if they're already in there, type their last name relatively quickly, or you can type their name in and put their social security number if you want to, or ID for the patient. You're going to select the 3G DynaROM lumbar test. You'll see this screen which comes up and it asks you to turn on all the devices. So you simply press the buttons. The red ones on the dual range of motion devices, just one button per device. It turns it on, and you can see, and then you'd press the white button on the dynamic device. The white button in the center is pressed to turn that on. So once they're all turned on, you'll see that actually lights up and turns green, showing the battery life also of all the devices. So the range of motion devices, you can simply press the left or right red button on each one. The one with the yellow sticker on it is considered the main device. It technically does not matter. You can place the main or auxiliary anywhere you want to, and find the most comfortable position to put it on. You can see once they turn on, you then press and release. You hold for about 2 seconds one of the red buttons, and it'll actually continue on to perform the test. So you're just simply pressing and holding for about 2 seconds one of the red buttons on the range of motion device, and it'll actually continue on to the next screen. And you can see there we are. Now it's going to want you to calibrate. You press and release one button at a time. So for left probe or right, you begin by pressing and releasing either the left or right probe, it doesn't matter, and let it calibrate. Once it's calibrated, you do the opposite one. So you'll see on the screen it'll say calibrated, calibration complete. It actually will talk, and then you can hold again one of the buttons, the red button, for about 2 seconds, and it actually go on to perform the test. Here we're clicking on finish, but you can actually hold down the button and it'll do the same thing. Now the top of the screen is your dynamic EMG, the bottom is your range of motion data outlined in green. We take our dual inclinometers and we're performing the combination of dual inclinometry and range of motion here. And you can see the EMG and range of motion are all measured at the same time. We have the dynamic probe on the side so it doesn't get in the way. You can sit when you're doing this, you can stand, whatever you're comfortable with. Place the probes in a manner in which you can rest your hand on the patient, which stabilizes the device. It gives you extremely accurate readings. So you have the patient bend forward. Now we hit the button to begin the test so it zeroes it, and then you have them bend forward. So you don't just have them bend forward. You press and release the button and it'll say begin scanning, and you have them bend forward. Come back to neutral, you mark it, you bend forward, you wait till they're forward, let the readings drop in the EMG, and when they're at the bottom, mark it, return back to neutral, wait for the readings to drop in the EMG, don't just use the range of motion data, mark it by pressing the red button, only one of them, bend forward again. We wait for the readings to drop in the EMG. We're looking for the trough, the lowest reading. Mark it, come back up to neutral, and then we mark it. And once you're done with the test, you move on to the next screen, which is going to be extension, by pressing and holding the red button on one of the range of motion devices until you see the next screen pop up. So you press the red button, you hold it down for about 2 seconds, release it, and you'll see it'll take you to the next screen. There's no need to go to the computer for the rest of the test. All this has been optimized so you never have to use the computer at all. It's all done with the red buttons on the dynamic range of motion probes. Now you can see a new screen, which is going to be extension. You zero it again once you place the probes. You zero it by pressing and releasing one of the red buttons, either the top or the bottom one. And here we're moving them so that they're allowed to pass each other, so they're not in line with each other. It gives them the ability to go past each other if they're able to extend back far enough. So we again press the red button to zero it and then begin the extension process. And once they're in full extension, you will mark it with a red button, only one red button, come back to neutral, wait for the EMG readings to drop, mark it, we go into extension again, mark it, back to neutral, mark it, and then again with the red button, we return back to extension for a third trial, and obviously all of these are being done in slow motion. Mark it, back to neutral, mark it. Now again, you press and hold the red button for about 2 seconds and it pops up with the next screen, which is our lateral flexion. And you can see what happens here. We're applying the probes. You can put that upside down if you want to, the bottom one, or right side up, either one. Hold the top one against the skin. Some people put their hands around it, whatever is comfortable for you. I actually can place my fingers the way you normally use it and just sort of jam them into the skin so it holds it. But whichever works for you. Some people hold it like that. Some people find that they hold it like this is best. The main thing is just to get stable on the skin. And again, we use our red button to begin on only one of the probes. And again, there's 4 buttons set up for left or right-handed individuals. That's why there's 4 buttons. You only need to use one of them, though, of all of the 4. So here we begin by zeroing it. Press and release the left or right button, wait for it to say begin scanning. And then you perform your left lateral flexion. Again, all this in slow motion. We mark it at the peak this time with the EMG, back to neutral. Mark it when it's at a valley in the EMG. Go to the left. One of the key little tricks is to count 1, 2 before you mark it in neutral. When you're going to left lateral, any of the non-plane motions, the left lateral flexion rotation, you mark it at the peak with the EMG, and then the valley for neutral. So you let the readings drop down in neutral and then mark it. And then when you're going to the end of the range of motion, left lateral flexion for example, you mark it at a peak in the EMG, not the range of motion but the EMG. Now to move on to right lateral flexion, you simply press and hold the red button, and that will move you on to the next screen. And then you are going to press and release the left button, and when it says begin scanning, you begin your motion. Again, mark it at the peak with the EMG, the highest point, and then back to neutral, and wait now for the lowest value on the EMG, and then mark it. Peak, mark it, back to neutral, and we mark it with the red button. Again, we go to the right. We're going to mark it at the peak, back to neutral, and we're pressing and releasing the red button. We never hold it down ever, except for to move to the next screen, but you only hold it for 2 seconds. So now we're going to move on to the next. Now with rotation in the lumbar spine, we cannot measure range of motion and rotation. As you know, in the AMA guides, it doesn't show the range of motion. So what we're going to do now is we're going to perform the rotation with them seated. We use the genie arm position. We can use our range of motion device red buttons to mark these. So you hit the button to begin the test. You go to the left, you mark it with a red button. When they're at the peak, they come back to neutral. Now you're going to mark it at a valley by pressing the red button. If it doesn't show up, make sure to press the button again. Sometimes you have to make sure to press it long enough to get it. Mark it at the peak. Come back to the valley, count 1, 2, mark it. We go again to the left. We catch it at the peak by hitting the red button. And then we return to neutral, and we press the red button to mark neutral. Now when we're done, we move on to the right rotation by holding down the red button until the next screen pops up. Now we're going to do right rotation. Press the button. It'll say begin scanning. Go to the right. You press the button and release to mark the rotation. Now you press it at neutral at the bottom lowest reading. Go to the right, we press it again to mark the peak. Come back to neutral, count 1, 2, press the button, release it. Go back to the right, you press and release the button to mark the end range of motion for rotation. And that's essentially the end of the test. At this point, you are done, and you can actually have the results by clicking on the review button. You can bring up the actual test results. What you see here is the results show up on the screen, and you see your range of motion at the bottom part of the screen with your EMG data at the top of the screen. And at the bottom, way at the bottom of the screen, you can actually select tabs for each motion. So you can click on and review each motion. You click there. Here you can click for extension, and then you can click to see lateral flexion, and here you can see right lateral flexion. Now we don't generate reports because MRIs don't generate reports. Doctors have to do them. We do have templates for reports, so you can fill them in very easily. But we've learned that insurance companies do not like it to see canned reports, so we're going to have to do these interpretations. But that explains how to do all the testing. Thank you.